welcome to Suffrage and Sovereignty. I apologize, this episode is a few days late. I've actually been a little sick, and then I also got into a car accident, so I had to deal with that. But I'm back in action, and I have an episode that I previously recorded with Garett Roush on marijuana and libertarian activism on campus. And Garett talks about his epilepsy and how marijuana has helped him with school and his life. Alcohol kills about 88,000 people a year. Tobacco kills nearly 500,000 people, whereas marijuana kills 0 people a year. So it's got people questioning, why is marijuana illegal in the first place? And if we go back to around 1930, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics at the time was Harry Anslinger, and there was a major cut in funding. What Harry Anslinger did was spread a rumor, and the rumor that was spread suggested that marijuana was responsible for rape and murders, and that it caused particularly illegal Mexicans to be violent because they at the time were large users of marijuana. Rumors are very dangerous, especially when they are spread by large companies or by the government. You might have heard the rumor that the War of the Worlds was broadcasted, and people listening to the radio broadcast thought it was real and freaked out. But that was actually a rumor started by newspapers who were trying to demonize radio as being dangerous. The war on drugs, as we know it, actually didn't start until the Nixon campaign, when Nixon declared drugs as public enemy number one. And John Ehrlichman, who was the counsel and assistant to the president in domestic affairs, said that Nixon knew that drugs weren't dangerous and he was demonizing them. I'm not sure how true that is because he was dead when the person who interviewed him allegedly said that. He said the quote, "I used to be fairly against marijuana around 10th, 11th grade. I supported the legalization, but I thought it was just really a stupid issue to focus on. I thought that it was stupid for the United States as a nation to be so focused on marijuana when we could have been focused on something much more serious. And it wasn't until I got into the multiple social, economic, and societal variables that marijuana affected that I realized how much of an impact the legalization of marijuana would have on society." And I think the best example of this is New York, when they started focusing on violent crime and not so much on victimless crimes. They had their jail rate decrease by 50%, actually 58%, and violence cut by half within a year. This was pretty recent. This was 2015 or 2016. And after they made their changes, it was extremely helpful for violent crime, and it saved a lot of people and stopped a lot of violence. So anyway, here's my conversation with Garett.
Garett, go ahead and explain your history with marijuana.
For sure. So it kind of boils down to the fact that I am epileptic. I was diagnosed with juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. For about 2 years on and off, I was having tonic-clonic seizures, but they're more widely known as grand mal seizures. I used marijuana, I was in college, I used marijuana very occasionally. I didn't really think of it as a medical solution. I always thought it was kind of almost a joke. But then I moved to Syracuse, and I had the opportunity to live in a very 420 friendly household. I had a lot of people pushing me. The first week I got to Syracuse, I actually had a grand mal seizure in my room. It was really almost kind of eye-opening, and I just tried marijuana. I was like, screw it, what other options do I have at this point? And then 1 month went by, no seizure. 2 months went by, 3 months, 4 months. And now I'm at about 10 and a half months. I mean, it was years. It boils down to the fact that I've been using marijuana to treat my epilepsy. The FDA-approved drugs were only masking the symptoms, and they weren't really helping my epilepsy altogether. I was still having breakthrough seizures no matter what. But now, with marijuana, not only has it helped my epilepsy, but it helps the root causes of the epilepsy. For many, you can think like strobe lights, might cause someone having a seizure, dehydration. My epilepsy really kind of derives from anxiety, depression, lack of sleep. I've never got diagnosed as insomniac, but I really had trouble sleeping. So I would wake up not feeling well, which would ultimately make me have a seizure. So it really helped all those, not just epilepsy, but the stuff that was contributing to it. And ultimately, it's made me a better student, a better worker. I think a better person overall, just because I'm not anxious and not, scared of having a seizure anymore.
Yes, and for people who don't know, and for my education, because I might not be getting this completely accurate, a grand mal seizure, that's something wrong with the consciousness of your brain, and you go out almost into like a dream state and start like shaking uncontrollably. Is that?
Yeah, so you go unconscious. I mean, it can range from one to, I've heard people having grand mal seizures for 15 minutes. I usually have around 2 minutes, was kind of where my seizures lasted. All your muscles are contracting. So you come out of this unconscious state, you're kind of like delusional. I don't, like, for example, I'm not much of a crier. But when I come out of a seizure, I don't know what I'm at. I feel like I just got hit by a truck.
Wow.
It's one of the most painful things that I've experienced. And coming out of it, you're really not in a good state. Yeah. It's really hard to explain. Really, I don't want people to have to experience it. But it really is. You come out in a lot of pain. Your muscles are contracting at an incredible rate. So you're sore for about 2 weeks straight. Yeah, but you lose consciousness during grand mal seizures, which is why many people who have grand mal seizures are not allowed to drive. And depending on the state that you live in, I'm lucky enough to live in Michigan, where it's only 6 months. So, that I've had my seizures under control. In states like New York, it's about a year. That could really be tough for people, with this kind of disability, to find jobs, to find, to really feel like they have value. It's not easy when you're 22 years old and you can't drive. You're about to come out with your bachelor's degree. It makes the possibility limited.
Yeah, that's terrible. I know someone. I was with her when she had a seizure. We were in the Chicago conference for Yale, I believe.
Okay.
About a year ago. And she had a seizure in her room because we got pulled over on our drive to Chicago and they took her marijuana away. She can't get medical marijuana because of a law stating you have to be with your primary care doctor for 5 years in Ohio, where she lives. And she has only been with her primary doctor for like 3 or 4 years. I'm not advocating for doing drugs illegally. However, that is a pretty big deal if we have people such as Garett and my friend who are having these problems, and people around the United States are having these problems, and there's laws restricting marijuana with no looking at individual cases.
But there's definitely demand. There's no matter what, even with you're in a state that I guess has approved medical marijuana, and a lot of the states that do have medical marijuana, it's still very difficult to get. It's very expensive. I was able to get my medical marijuana card in New York, and they wouldn't allow for basic cannabis. You had to either you get an oil, you could use a vape, and I forget the other one. I think it was something you put on your tongue. It was like a dissolvable. Just for about a month's worth, maybe less, or I guess a vape. Using wax or I don't think it's wax. I ended up not buying it. I didn't even look into it even more. It was $350. The people that need it are, for example, like myself, I'm 22 years old. I'm a college student. I can't afford $350 a month. To pay for medical marijuana in New York. Ultimately I had to, and I guess I admit it. I had to go through a different route to find that marijuana for a much cheaper price, and it still helped me. It is necessary, but the more it kind of grows in price because of high regulation and high taxes, it's not going to be actually accessible for those lower middle class people that really do need it.
The black market is the free market.
You're preaching to the choir, right? I would absolutely love a free market. I mean, and even the black market has to raise its prices just because due to the legality of it. I mean, there's also the cost of doing illegal business. But the crazy thing, it's still more affordable than going to, for many states, a medical marijuana or even sometimes legal marijuana provider.
Oh, yeah.
Because ultimately, with those high regulations and taxes, it's still going to pull people to the black market. For example, I forget which state, I think has around total 20% taxes, including local, state, and then there's usually marijuana sales tax. But after 20% more in price, it's just not very affordable. Obviously, I'm for states legalizing marijuana at any cost. The less people imprisoned for using this drug that has no deaths accounted for because of it. I love how Joe Rogan said it. In the documentary, The Culture High, he said the only way you can get killed by marijuana is if you're flying in a plane and someone dropped, I'm paraphrasing, but dropped a 25-pound bag of weed on someone's head. The only way you can get killed by weed. The ultimate goal, right, is to have a complete free market where marijuana can be easily accessible for people who need it. But I guess the goal now is we need to make it legal. People shouldn't be in prison for trying to medicate themselves or just having it recreationally. It's a drug that really the side effects. What's the difference between someone coming home at night, smoking a joint before they go to bed, or someone having a couple beers before they go to bed?
Well, the difference would be alcohol is a lot worse for you.
And there's even studies out there that show that alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs. I wish I had the study on me. I actually had the pleasure of having Wolf on Ward, the CEO of Students for Liberty, as well as Jeff Dyson, Mises Institute, Julie Borowski. And I even brought in Liberty meetings for a panel at Syracuse University for, it was called The Land of the Not So Free, the economic, medical, and social impacts of the war on drugs. And there was a study from, I believe, the UK, ranking the drugs that has the most harms toward others, and alcohol was number one. So not only are you kind of harming yourself, alcohol does have a tendency to be dangerous.
Yeah, for sure.
Towards the people around you as well.
Yes, it's definitely the most abusable. It has the ability to be abused because of the effects. There was a point where I was, quote unquote, against the legalization of marijuana. And I'm going to say when that was, why I was, and why I changed my mind. I'm hoping that will help people who are still on the fence about it.
Okay.
When I was against marijuana, it was in high school when I actually had an opinion. I would just say, yes, marijuana isn't harmful. My only problem is, what does that say about our culture when our biggest issue is wanting to legalize drugs? Like, why is that such a big deal? Why aren't we focusing on bigger things? Fine, legalize marijuana, but why are we making such a big deal out of it? And I did not like that it was such a big deal. And then what changed my mind is research that came out that showed, probably in 11th grade, maybe, how the legalization of marijuana would greatly help the economy, how it would actually stop abuses of opiates a lot. Huge amounts of deaths from opiates would be solved. The economy would be saved by multiple reasons, one of which is the taxation of the drug itself and just the money you would save by law enforcement. And then one of the final things that really helped convince me was just personal stories. How many people were actually affected by this drug? How many people went to jail? And when they got out of jail, their life was ruined because they got unlucky.
Yeah, to kind of respond to that, I mean, obviously, as a libertarian, as a classical liberal, I ultimately say, well, it's my freedom to put what into my body, right? I mean, that's kind of the generic argument, especially when you're speaking to other libertarians, right? But when it comes to the older generations, those more conservative generations, just because now I'm a medical marijuana advocate and legalization advocate as well for the past 4 months, ever since I opened up on Facebook about my story, and then I actually wrote for Rare.
Yes, you got an article published in Rare. That was, I'm good job. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was cool to share my story, and it was a really cool experience I never thought I'd be published. I mean, I have to thank Students for Liberty absolutely for that opportunity, and Matthew Boyer specifically. He's the man. I love him. He does a great job.
Go read Garett's article, guys, on Rare.com. If they just Google your name, Garett Roush on Rare, they'll find it.
Yeah, it's called Jeff Sessions' Crusade Against Marijuana Hurts the Most Vulnerable, and then it's basically about my personal experience with medical marijuana and about Sessions wanting to kind of get rid of the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment that puts a protection on medical marijuana providers in states that have legalized medical marijuana. So right now, even though, yes, federally it is illegal, the federal government really does not enforce federal law in these states that have legalized it. If the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment was reversed, Jeff Sessions would have the manpower to go into these states and shut down these medical marijuana facilities and even possibly protect the states that have legalized it as well, which I don't think is something the federal government needs to get into. A little bit sidetracked there, but ultimately there's kind of two arguments. I mean, there's one more argument to libertarians. A lot of progressives are obviously for legalization. When it comes down to freedom, the government shouldn't be able to tell me what I should put into my body. It's almost like being pro-choice, I guess. I get to decide.
Yes, somewhat. I wouldn't use that argument with conservatives because there's the argument of, like, what about poison? Are you allowed to put poison in your body?
Correct. When it comes to those old generations, I mean, this is where you kind of switch the foot argument, right?
Yes.
When I talk to my grandparents about marijuana, I'm not saying I'm a free person, I should be able to do this, because, I mean, they have a negative stereotype of marijuana. I mean, how can I blame them? They grew up in the 60s and the 70s, I mean, during Nixon and Reagan. comes in, and then Nancy Reagan's. This was all they grew up with. That's all they know.
Yes, I know. I'm terrified of the day in like 30 years when I find out how much moral and knowledgeable people are. Like I'm terrified of that leap. But I understand like the generation gap.
Yeah, well, it ultimately comes down to just a lack of understanding. And,
Yes.
I mean, for a while, marijuana was almost taboo. I mean, we didn't talk about it. Now you see TV shows nowadays just, referencing it like it's no big deal. Even now it's highly federally legal. It's still a Schedule I drug. But when it comes to those older generations, this is why, when it comes to legalization of marijuana, it is about education, but it's also how is legalizing going to benefit them? And this is where the political games come in, right? For example, in Michigan right now, the ballot language was just passed to legalize marijuana in Michigan. They need 252,000 signatures. In just over a month and a half, they have over 100,000. They're doing a fantastic job, but we believe is regulate marijuana like alcohol. The coalition regulate marijuana like alcohol, and that's the kind of their goal. That's what much of the language says. There's it comes with a 6% sales tax, which is the Michigan sales tax, and the 10% marijuana sales tax. But they're sell to these, those people, probably between the ages of 40 and up. I guess 40 and up, and specifically 55 and older. We really need to, we're really pushing that these taxes are going to go towards our infrastructure. They're going to go towards our education. We need to show them benefits from this.
Yes.
That's kind of the main way to bring them over to voting for it. We need to, and also just kind of educate. I mean, education is kind of limited out there. I mean, yes, there's stuff on Google, but my grandparents aren't sitting on Google looking up marijuana studies. It needs to become more public. It needs to become more transparent. We need to start doing grassroots activism, go door to door, talking to people about it.
I mean, I know a lot of people. I mean, personally, my grandparents are very well educated and they read the news every day. So they're pretty caught up on the subject of marijuana. Whereas my parents, it's a little bit different. I definitely know that there's a lot of articles. I mean, you see the end of a Motrin commercial or the end of like any commercial on TV. It's like side effects may include nausea, diarrhea, confusion, paranoia, death. Like it's ridiculous just for like any type of drug. And that's kind of what they're doing with marijuana. They're listing all the side effects. And if we're really going to talk about what marijuana does to you, it from my understanding, from everyone I've talked to and all the studies I've looked at, it kind of calms you down as well as heightens different states of mood.
Well, we have to be careful. Specifically, I would say is if we stick only to the opioids argument, for example, we use if we have marijuana, they'll bring down opioids. If we have marijuana, people like myself. So I was on like FDA-approved drugs. I was on Celexa, Ativan, Klonopin, benzos, and they made me feel like a zombie. And I could use that argument, and I can bring a lot of people over, specifically over kind of sympathy. But the rebuttal to that is, well, medical is legal. That's all medical stuff. Why does it need to be legalized? So we have to find a new argument other than just opioids and, hey, it's helping this guy. Because if we stick to that, people are going to be, we already have this. This is fine. We have medical. We want to take it to the next step. We have to find a way where we can reach a middle ground with those conservatives that are against it. And right now in Michigan, with the youth, 18 to 29-year-olds, 77% for, right? 55 and up, 68% against. Now, here's the issue. While those numbers sound good, I mean, what's the issue with the youth?
They don't vote.
They do not vote, which is why we're trying to push youth operations here in Michigan. At the same time, we have to bring that number down to 68%. The older generations, they influence. They're participating in their local communities, and that's where we kind of need to start. The youth need to become more prevalent. I mean, we all love talking about national politics, federal politics, but we need to get involved in the state. We need to get involved locally as well. Talk about our experiences. Talk about why legalizing marijuana will help our economy. Colorado just brought in over $1 billion in 2016.
If you were like a state representative, what would be your first step as to trying to get people to vote? Personally, I would go with, and I know this is not economically conservative, but I would go for free fidget spinners to anyone who votes in local elections.
So to get the youth to vote?
To get the youth to vote. Like, how do you get the youth to vote? I'm terrified of voting because I think it's trickery.
It is. It's kind of difficult. Here's one thing that I really want to start pushing is like educational videos on absentee ballot, putting registration drives, talking about the issue on college campuses, for example. A lot of students do not stay in the same city or the same where they're supposed to vote, like right next to their polling site or where they're supposed to vote when they go to college. I'm in Syracuse. I'm from Michigan. Not a lot of students understand how to obtain an absentee ballot or even how it works or when do I need to register to vote. That knowledge, it's accessible, but it's not really out there. But college students are very passionate about their ideas, but can be kind of apathetic towards the political process or just the process of voting overall. And I think it comes down to the fact that we really struggle at educating the youth on, all right, when do I need to register to vote? Why is it important to vote? I guess I could get a lot of ANCAPs mad at me right now, but
I mean, I think it's more that the process is designed and set up that way on purpose.
Yeah, it is, but that can't be our excuse. We have to find ways around it, and ultimately it comes down to being on the ground, talking to people. Think about this. I mean, the marijuana campaign again has already over 100,000 signatures, and
right.
It's all there's no online petition. It's all door to door or talking to people in their communities. That's huge, and that's what we need to do. I mean, marijuana is an issue that is very popular with the youth.
Yes, and that segments into our next conversation, getting the youth in college campuses to fight for liberty and what we are doing wrong.
So I love libertarians. I do. I really do. I love SFL. I love the people I meet. I love the Young Americans for Liberty and stuff they do as well. I think one thing that libertarians tend to lack, and I hope that anyone gets upset with me, is kind of emotional intelligence. They are very objective, and I believe libertarians are some of the most intelligent people that I've ever met. I go to these conferences, I'll talk to people about economics, and I'll be like, my mind's blown, But at the same time, I think we're very much eager about being right. And
yes, I would agree with that.
And sometimes when it comes to libertarians, we're trying to convince people to the point that they're going to switch their ideology overnight. 3 years ago, I was a Christian neoconservative who wanted to vote for Ben Carson in the upcoming election in 2016. I was ready for Ben Carson to run. I was so excited.
I liked Ben Carson.
I liked him too.
It was not for any substantive reasons. He just looked like a stand-up guy. I liked the way he looked. He looked like a strong military general that could lead the nation.
Well, his story was interesting. I mean, he grew up. We're from Michigan. He grew up in Detroit. He grew up in poverty. It was. I almost had an attachment to it. But I was very much, for foreign wars. I was totally, again, just wipe them out. I didn't really have an understanding about how that actually affects the policy overseas and how it affects terrorism. Ultimately, it wasn't. I didn't become a libertarian overnight. It took 2 years for me to be introduced to Ron Paul. So start watching.
Ron Paul did it to me too. It still surprises me how many people got influenced by Ron Paul.
Yeah, he made sense. I mean, he did. It just clicked. And that's why I very much lean. I love having conversations with people from the left. I love being on campus and talking to those. But ultimately, I mean, Ron Paul and Milton Friedman. My favorite is Anthony Davies when he talks about econ. And just, for example, he talked about the national debt. He was able to, for someone like, I'm not an econ major. I always struggled with numbers, okay? But he was able to explain it in a way that it just clicked.
Yes.
And I naturally kind of gravitated towards it.
Yes. I like the philosophical economists a lot. Even Hayek.
Hayek's great. Hayek's fantastic. Hayek, Sowell, I'm a fan of. Rothbard, I mean, those guys are great. Like, for example, creative destruction. I never thought of it. For example, the taxi industry, how Uber and Lyft, how, we're kind of slowly but surely destroying the taxi industry, but we're creating something better for consumers, making it more accessible, I guess, to use your own car. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, obviously not amazing for those who, in the taxi unions and who are very much depend on, I guess, their job as a taxi driver. Ultimately, it's just a better option. And so, I mean, getting that across, I mean, those speakers, I mean, those libertarianism, anyways, I guess.
Yes, back to your point. And I agree with you a lot on this, by the way.
Yeah, great. But at the same time, here's I guess ultimately my issue. What's going on campus, libertarians, is that we are very much about being right. A lot of libertarians are debaters. Many of them are very vocal about their opinion, and sometimes we hear but we don't listen. And I believe in empathy. I don't think a lot of people, when I say empathy, people are like, oh, you want us to just allow for people to spew this kind of democratic, socialist, communist, universal healthcare nonsense. I'm like, no, I'm not saying start not allowing, but believing in what they're saying. But I'm saying just try to understand where they're coming from.
Yes. I mean, I had an argument with somebody, a libertarian, the other day who said that communists need to be flown out in helicopters out of the United States. I cannot deal with them. And my argument towards them was, okay, so your standard for having someone driven out of an airplane or a helicopter or whatever is them being wrong. How far do you want to draw that line? Because I guarantee that I'm wrong and you're wrong and everybody in the United States is wrong about something, have a bias that misconstrues our understanding of reality. One of the most dangerous things in any ideology is getting to a point where you believe you're right. Because once you have that, then you think everyone else who is opposed to your right is disposable. And that's not good. And it happens throughout history over and over and over again. These people think they're so right about something that the ends start justifying the means, and anybody else is just disposable.
And I think ultimately the goal needs to be about incrementally bringing someone to liberty, not necessarily being right. And I think that's what we're missing on college campuses. I mean, I've heard stories, people who turn communist and libertarian overnight, or even anarcho-capitalist overnight. I've heard those stories. But a large majority of the time, it takes time. I guess it does take time to bring someone over.
Yes, it's very incremental. And I think the most successful thing for me has been promoting the freedom of ideas. Like, hey, let's come have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's why, so Syracuse, it was my first year there, I transferred there. And the first event that we held was about ending the war on drugs. Now, yes, I'm a huge marijuana advocate, but secondly, the reason why I did this is because it's also pulling in people from the left, and we're getting our name recognition out there. And what we're doing is bringing this discussion. We're bringing them. We had over 100 people come to this event. About half of them were students, and the other half are from the local community. And we were able to talk to people who wouldn't necessarily come to our meetings just from our name. I think what we had to do is kind of develop a presence on campus that could kind of appeal to the left and to other libertarians. Get them to the meetings, start talking to them, having discussion with them in your meetings or at socials or whatever, and really focus on how we're going to bring these people in. Because I mean, everything's so divided right now, right? Everything's so polarized, and even especially on college campuses. So we have to figure out the best way to market what we stand for.
Are you familiar with Eric July?
Yes. He's the rapper, right?
Yeah. I have a bone to pick with him. I want to have a conversation because this is basically, and I'm very fine to have an open, honest, non-confrontational conversation with him about it, but he attacks left libertarianism a lot. And from my perspective, what are you doing? If we have left libertarians here, then we can use our freedom of speech, logic, communication to convert them into whatever you want them to be. They're willing to have the discussion. And if you're right, then you can convert them.
Yeah, and I don't believe that's a very, I don't think that's the point. I mean, everyone, at the end of the day, everyone, even if you get into a debate, whether you're left libertarian or right libertarian, they're going to end up in their echo chambers. They're going to go after the debate, they're going to go to imright.com and just row it out. It doesn't help. It doesn't really provide actual productive conversation. I mean, when you're just kind of lashing out, and what is a left libertarian now? Is a left libertarian someone who believes, you're kind of a firm believer in Noam Chomsky, or is it a left libertarian just someone who's left of you? That's what I'm getting worried about, because I'm kind of, a mixture between kind of conservatarian personally, just with my core values. I kind of sometimes affiliate as a conservatarian, but, politically and pragmatically, I consider myself a classical liberal. Am I considered a left libertarian because of that?
I don't like labels. I consider myself a contrarian. I like to really argue beliefs. I like to really get down to the nuts and bolts of every belief.
At the end of the day, it comes down, I think, to this. Libertarians need to seek out, I think, closer relationships with those with different opinions.
For sure.
We go out to attack love to debate. But the real change comes from, this is going to sound kind of corny. A lot of the friends that I have, are definitely kind of, at Syracuse specifically, I mean, Syracuse is very left-leaning, are much more, Bernie supporters, democratic socialists, quote unquote. And the way I've been able to bring them to liberty, at least somewhat, or at least move them towards, towards that avenue, is creating a friendship with them.
Yes, for sure.
And not making every discussion with them about politics. People that like you are more willing to hear you out. So if you come off as a hostile human being, you come off as someone you're going to kind of degrade them with having a different opinion. I get it. You want more liberty in the world. That's great. But I think this very hostile way of doing it just turns people away from liberty ultimately.
Yeah. That's why in-groups are so popular, because if you it's dangerous to ever believe something very full-heartedly, because if you do that, then nobody who also believes that same thing is going to hate you. So you have nobody that hates you, and it feels nice, like, oh, I believe this and nobody hates me. And then every other belief system is going to seem like you're getting attacked, whereas your belief system is going to seem like, oh, these guys are friendly. It's a huge in-group bias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's true. The left does have a stranglehold on higher education. I think that's definitely true. But at the same time, I really don't think this hostile way of going about it is going to be the answer.
Yes, and let me try to explain left libertarianism. Left libertarianism wants a focus on increasing equality and helping the poor. And they want to do that by what libertarians already want. They want a freer market. They want less taxes. And money is the best thing ever for eliminating most types of biases, because when you have money, you don't care about whether the person is male or female or what race they are. If you give them money, suddenly in their mind you're cool, you're aight, So they like the idea of free markets, and they want to use the free markets to promote more equality, but they also want to be a little bit more outspoken about equality, but in a nonviolent way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of being progressive without wanting the government to kind of get involved with. I think when I think of left libertarianism, I think of people that are kind of more progressive, that do want more equality, and do believe in ensuring those freedoms and liberties for those who are have been marginalized. But at the same time, I don't think they necessarily believe that the government is going to ensure those freedoms.
Yes.
So I think it's more, to be honest, I think it's not really libertarianism, left libertarianism, or right libertarianism. I think it's more kind of this liberalism versus conservatism.
All right, so that's Garett Roush, Northeast Regional Director.
Yes.
For Students for Liberty. And plug your Twitter and your Facebook, Garett. What are they?
I'm not really on Twitter, but you're more than welcome to add me on Facebook. It's Garett with 1 R and 2 T's, and then Roush, Roush.
Roush. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been pronouncing your name wrong this whole time.
That's all right. I get it a lot. Don't worry.
Garett Roush, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your knowledge about marijuana and your personal experience. Wish you the best of luck, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Austin. This is my first ever podcast, so it's going to have a cool experience.